最好冇影到人啊！
好難嘅。O.K.
點解你換240級嘅 command 嘅曲定？
用翻佢
好似720嘅 command 嘅喎，你可以用。如果咁講，咪真係我哋未必有720出。
喂，你轉咗個通常咁嘅樣。
你而家得240㗎咋，最多，如果咁做。你咁咪得240出㗎咋，大佬真係黐線啊！或者都得240嘅點解？你睇下嗰度係咪咩？
咩啊？
咪720啊？你睇下冇得
佢
揀。
support720啫，唔代表 YouTube 係720。
得㗎，YouTube 啦。有冇720揀？你咪 check 嘅咩？
咩啊？
你咪 check 嘅咩
？check 要得㗎啫嘛，點會 check 咩720咧？
啊？
今日佢玩得咁差。因為佢直播緊啊嘛，直播緊就俾你 set 啲咁嘅嘢。720可能係你錄完之後就可以轉720放出嚟啫。
有係啊，所以我係720。好，你可以揀720，而家720可以。頭先嗰個位 display 唔到。縮咗唔使。
Hello? Can you hear me? Good. You know, when you go to a performance in the theatre, the best and most expensive seats are in front. So please come forward. I tell you why you should. Because you get a lot more if you sit in the first few rows. Come on. Don't be shy. I'm not going to eat you. Come on. 既然你哋咁早嚟，應該坐到最好嘅位。你哋聽下走，我哋都唔計。
呢度有個
呢個真係呢個真係。
If you're seated in front. That's been my experience over the years. You're not going to fall asleep.
唔係開咗咩
recording 嘅。 出嚟地方。
佢頭先打過嚟話個咁嚟㗎。
唔開始玩㗎，唔開始。
9點半
唔係有個喺度咩？
喺嗰度啊嘛。
湊人佢咧，我啱 send 佢都可能唔收，想我哋睇下佢個 video 同埋 PowerPoint。
你連張台都冇埋嘅。
一陣間
都好似你企後邊，
放你坐喺後面。
半日
嚇？
企半日咯。
坐喺度得咯。
有凳咩？得俾張凳。
出面攞咪得咯。
冇得再高。冇啊！哦，你話呢個？應該冇得再高喎，再高。你可以咁樣，嗰陣時有呢個腳嚟㗎咋？你做咩啊？呢啲冇得再長㗎啦，唔使諗㗎。當然你可以拍埋少少，但係好危險。咪影住個泡泡啊！
冇人啊嘛，影住個光碼先咯。
this is IT，每个星座他 job。你穿到底了，
不行。
Sure.
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies. We are about to start. For those of you who would need SI simultaneous interpretation, please get a machine from the counter. The SI service that we are going to provide this morning is only from Cantonese to English. So what you'll be listening from this device will be English only. So if you understand Cantonese, then no need to use this device. Okay? Thank you. Actually, for our discussion later on today, you can speak in whatever languages you like. By that, I mean English, Cantonese, and a little bit of Putonghua as well, not another language. Thank you.
實味道，唔知啊。
咪加埋。其實我哋係主要影呢度嘅咩嘅？定係要影 PowerPoint 嘅？係啊，其實係可以影晒嘅，但要幾部機咯。但我哋冇呢個嘢。
唔緊要，PowerPoint 你就可以即係 upload PowerPoint 噶嘛，咁段片成最緊要佢哋喺度咯。
哦，有兩片噶嘛？
係啊，
即係影晒嘅就咁得噶咯。
係 OK。
我唔使鬆咗。
唔使。死咗啦！佢有嗰條線啊，搏佢搏邊咪得咯。咁啊，啲錢冇喐啊。
Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the delay. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this event. It's not just one event, but it's the first of a series of 3 events. We have an open seminar this morning, and then in the noontime, we'll have a luncheon, and also tomorrow we've got a workshop. So for those of you who have enrolled for all 3 events, thank you very much. And for those of you who is only coming for this morning's event, also thank you very much, because this is really the highlight of everything. I am here only to introduce our moderator today, because he, Mr. Jim, Mr. Xiao Jim, will be taking over. Mr. Jim, Mr. Jim will be taking over everything from me in a few minutes' time. So he will also introduce the speakers. Just a matter of logistics. I think I should thank all the organizers and co-organizers of all these 3 events, including the Academy of Hong Kong Studies from the Education University of Hong Kong. Also, co-organizing all these events are the Center for Communication and Public Opinion Survey of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. We also have the Center for Social Policy Studies from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So you can see that together with POP from this university, we're actually joining hands. All universities are joining hands to host this event. Obviously, this event would not be so successful without the support of Project Citizen Foundation, and of course, Mr. Jim is the representative from the foundation. Today and tomorrow, we have our guest from Harvard University, John De La Ruppa, with us. So Mr. Jim will introduce him to you very soon. But this has been made possible because the U.S. Consul has been very kind to bring John to Hong Kong, and we are riding on his travel to Hong Kong to give us this seminar and also the 2 other activities. I've already explained to you that there will be simultaneous translation from Chinese or Putonghua to English. So if you do not quite understand Chinese, just put on the earpiece and switch to 01 channel, and that's it. So I think without due delay, let me pass everything to Mr. Jim. Perhaps I should add a few words about Mr. Jim. We have a bio of him in our publicity, but I've already told you that Mr. Jim is now the chairman of the Project Citizens Foundation. Mr. Jim is a very learned scholar and commentator, and he started his career as a journalist actually in BBC, TVB, and also other media. Has written a lot of articles, journal articles, and very recently, the Oxford University Press has actually published 6 volumes of his great work. So, without due delay, Mr. Jim, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. John. Welcome to Directors in Dialogue. I'm very pleased to see you all here. I hope by the end of the day, you will leave this hall feeling the 2 hours have been well spent. We have 2 distinguished speakers. The first is Professor John De La Ruppa, Director of Polling at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University. And the second speaker is, of course, our own Dr. Lau Zhong, Director of Public Opinion Program at the University of Hong Kong. After these 2 presentations, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and express your own views in the discussion with John. Let me first talk a little bit about polling, the polling that I know. I'm not a professional, but I did check out because I have to moderate this particular section. But polling of any significance and credibility started in 1935 with George Bell. It gained prominence the following year when it correctly predicted that Franklin Roosevelt would win the 1936 presidential election. When something has accurate predicted value, it will quickly find a following. whether it's horse racing, kickball, feng shui, or indeed Hong Kong's next chief executive race. But two things Gallup swore by in the early days: independence and objectivity have fallen by the wayside in recent times. And the Poll's predictive value is now much diminished, partly due to their proliferation, their very many of them, manipulation by different parties, and deception. I think our two speakers will address these in their presentations later. Today, the original purposes of polls to measure public views, opinions, attitudes, intentions, and behavior are no longer the sole purposes of the polls. Today, some polls are conducted with a view to mislead the public or counteract other polls. And polls, instead of being objective and independent, have become an instrument in the hands of some so-called pollsters. They are no longer disinterested parties, they are players themselves in a process called electoral engineering. The need for professional polling and established standards has never been greater than it is now. The best pollsters, like all good journalists and academics, should be truth seekers. They are driven by the desire to know and the need to find out. But because polling results can be such a powerful instrument, it is no longer just a gauge of public opinion and intention, but has become a major influence on eventual behavior, such as strategic voting, which Dr. Chung will comment on. In the light of the US presidential election in November and Hong Kong's own chief executive election in March, this seminar could not have taken place at a better time. Let me first give the floor to Professor Della Volpe, and let me just say a few words by way of introduction. Professor Della Volpe may look like Bradley Cooper. He is not the American sniper. We are saving Bradley Cooper for another occasion because he's less important. Professor Della Volpe has done a lot of polling in his 40 years. He's done, for instance, media polling. He's done campaign polling, and he's done academic polling. Now, I didn't know that there are actually 3 different kinds of polling until he told me yesterday. This shows you the range of experience he's had. He's very much sought after across the world, not just at Harvard and in the United States. I give you Professor Della Volpe.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here for the seminar, especially to the US Consul's Office for sponsoring this visit. It's at Hong Kong University. It's everybody who spent a part of your morning with me. If you would allow me just to make a quick change to my presentation here, I want to walk you through something that you might have heard about, which is called a phenomenon of Donald Trump. And what I would like to do is to spend my opening remarks walking through my analysis of what led us as Americans to be just a few weeks away from possibly electing Donald Trump president in a race that has 4 candidates. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, as well as two very significant, what we call third-party candidates, Gary Johnson, governor of New Mexico, and Jill Stein, a candidate from the Green Party. So, I will start my presentation, excuse me. So to understand Donald Trump and his rise, I think it's important to understand the state of America today. Okay? And I start with that with data that's not necessarily public opinion data, but economic data. And I want to put this into the proper context for folks. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So while we know that the first part of the century, on a global basis, we've seen kind of the expansion of the middle class on a global basis, which is what this data indicates. Unfortunately, in the U.S., things have been more stagnant, where only the very richest of Americans, the top half of the top 1%, have seen any real rise in income over the first part of the century. So while incomes are growing, middle class is growing for most of the world, for us in the U.S., we've essentially seen kind of our compensation, our payroll, the amount of income that we make on a regular basis actually flat or decline. There's some economic indications over the last couple of weeks that last year was a good year, but overall the sense is that we are falling behind the rest of the world. Okay? In particular, U.S. debt is on the rise in a very significant way. You can see marked by the chart on the left-hand side. You can see we are now, after the recession, we're doing better, but we're falling behind many European countries in the proportion of debts. Specifically, the idea of student debt. And one of my areas of expertise at Harvard is on the youth vote, or the millennial generation, which I'll talk to. But you can see the extent to which student debt is a real source of angst and frustration among most American families. It is the second leading cause of debt outside of the house mortgage, ahead of credit card, automobiles, etc., among households who have any sort of debt at all. So student debt, the ability to pay for college, is a significant factor. And something that I was quite surprised about when I looked at Gallup polling. As you said, the most important and significant pollster for the better part of a century, they actually conduct a global poll. We'll conduct hundreds of interviews or thousands of interviews a year in most countries around the world. And when I analyzed that data set over the last couple of weeks, I looked at a particular question, which was, did you experience stress yesterday in your household? Was there stress? And what I wanted to indicate is that Americans have as much stress or more stress than any other group of people in the world, except for folks who live in Iraq. Okay? So folks in Afghanistan, as an example, have less stress in their own minds, okay, than Americans do. Okay? So we look at the global economic middle class is expanding, ours is shrinking, we're experiencing a lot of stress. Only 1 in 4 Americans, and I'm interested in having a conversation about how some of these findings may or may not apply to your experiences here in Hong Kong. Only 1 in 4 Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction. I think if you're younger, you actually are in some ways even more pessimistic, which we can talk about in a few minutes. And the reason is, when you really boil it down, I think, to one number, there was a startling survey that was released on the cover of Atlantic magazine, which is essentially kind of a public policy magazine. They released a cover story this past spring where they quoted a survey conducted by the Federal Reserve, which said that about half of Americans could not access $400 American in case of a family emergency. So they would have a difficult time. If there was a medical emergency for some other kind, half of all Americans could not access $400 because they were essentially in so much debt. Including, by the way, the author of this article who is a well-known author. I think he holds a PhD, very successful. But just in terms of kind of where his life and the financial decisions he made over his time was essentially death. So given that, it shouldn't be surprising that unfortunately we've seen trust in most all institutions associated with the United States, as well as many world institutions as well, suffer significantly. You can see in 1980 things weren't necessarily great heading into the election of Ronald Reagan. Trust in those institutions had already been on the decline. But since 1980, we've seen trust, we trust only 27% of Americans trust banks, 60% trusted banks 30 years ago, 35 years ago, 20% trust newspapers and media, 41% trust church, 9% trust Congress, and less than 1 in 5 trust big business. Okay? And whereas millennials and kind of younger voters used to be more optimistic, used to be outliers, their opinions essentially going to mirror, I think, what you're seeing here. A number of trust in Congress is specifically kind of important as we think about the rise of Donald Trump. And this is a map which is very difficult to see and understand, but the point is, this is analysis of the media habits of members of Congress. This is a project that I did at my company, Social Sphere, where we essentially analyzed every member of Congress, 2014, and we want to say who they're following on Twitter. And the headline is actually that there's no singular truth. And even members of Congress, if you're Republican, you follow one set of folks on Twitter. If you're a Democrat, you follow another set of folks on Twitter. There's really not only is there no conversation between the two parties, but there's not even kind of singular truth in terms of the news media or current events in terms of what is or what isn't kind of a reality in public life. The good news, I think, is there are a handful of folks in the middle, some of the younger members of Congress, do seem interested in connecting with other members of their generation across party lines, which is good. We'll see the extent to which some of these other members get elected in 2016. I'm very honored that actually one of my former students is the youngest member of Congress elected as a female Republican from upstate New York. And she's focused in particular with Joe Kennedy, who is a congressman from Massachusetts, the grandnephew of President Kennedy. There are 2 indications that members of this generation are trying to expand discussion and dialogue beyond kind of partisan borders. But we certainly need more of that. And this concern about the media and not having a singular truth, I think is evident just about every day, especially relevant to the interpretation of polls. Okay? And as I think many of you know, not a lot of Americans are really concerned today about being, quote, politically correct. Okay? So this is a survey just from a couple of months ago from the Pew Research Center, who I have just a lot of respect for. And the question was, do you agree or disagree? People need to be careful with language to avoid offending people, compared to too many people are easily offended. And especially if you're a Republican, 4 out of 5 Republicans in America believe that people are too easily offended. They want to hear the, quote, the real truth. Okay? Think about that as I talk about Trump. Okay? So I've said so far that we're dealing with an American kind of populace who has just a tremendous amount of anxiety about paying bills on a daily basis. A lot of it is driven from student debt or stagnation of wages, etc. They have less trust in all these traditional institutions. There's not one singular outlet that folks trust in terms of media, and so many Americans believe that people are too easily offended. Okay? All these phenomena have been happening right before this presidential contest. When I actually Googled image searched to prepare for this presentation, I searched American worker on Google, and that's the image that I saw. Okay? Somebody working hard every day, could barely keep their head above water. And the singular most important piece of evidence that I was personally familiar with that made me realize about a year and a half ago that Donald Trump would be a significant contender for the presidency was part of my work as a pollster was a qualitative research. So as we know, there's multiple different ways that we collect data. A lot of the data we'll talk about is quantitative data, surveys, polls, tracking polls, benchmark polls, etc. But an important part of a pollster's job is to be in touch with folks through qualitative research or focus group. I conducted a focus group in a city called Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee is where Elvis Presley was from. Memphis, Tennessee is the city that Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. And I was there about a couple of years ago talking with a group of men about my age, maybe a little bit older, but they had sons who were in high school, also graduated high school. And without me having too much influence over the conversation, they essentially said that they were very concerned about the next 50 years of their lives. That they had done everything that they were told to do. They graduated from high school, some of them might have served in the military. They married their high school sweetheart, they bought a house. And there were no more hours, in the factory. There were no more jobs to take kind of within the community. They essentially wanted to work more, but there were just no more opportunities. And what they were literally doing was selling, and this wasn't my intention to ask them these questions, but this just kind of came organically from this conversation. Some of them were selling the possessions inside their home just to make ends meet that month. Okay? Some of them might have played the guitar as a hobby or rode a motorcycle. They had to sell their possessions just to keep a roof over their head. Okay? And the one thing they told me is the one thing they never really worried about was voting. That they wanted to leave voting in policy and politics, the folks in Washington, D.C. In the 90s, they voted for Bill Clinton. In the 2000s, they voted for George Bush. They didn't really pay attention. They voted for whoever was going to win most of the time. Okay? Now they're waking up at 50, literally not knowing how to make ends meet and how to pay the mortgage and keep a roof over their head. So just an incredible amount of stress. And this is a story of the American worker, and as they begin to talk amongst the group, they begin to take a look at other members of the community who have entered this community who weren't there maybe 20, 30 years ago. They begin to become somewhat resentful for other kinds of Americans. So they're not, divisive people by nature, but I think there's an opportunity to begin to drive a wedge in this community when somebody is so stressed out like this particular group of folks. And there are millions of American families and workers, I think, who fit into this situation, unfortunately. So all of what I've spoken about, had brought us to a place that we've never seen before. Okay, so on the Democratic side, we see that new voters and younger voters, okay, the Democratic Party voted overwhelmingly for an avowed democratic socialist who promised to do three things. To deal with the inequality, reduce the inequality that exists. So important in the United States to understand the sense of inequality by breaking up banks and making public college tuition free, accessible for anyone. Okay? Not surprising that Bernie Sanders, who started at 1% in my surveys back in April 2015, started 1%, he actually received more votes than Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump combined over the course of that year. Okay? He came from outside, although a United States Senator, former member of Congress, mayor of Burlington, Vermont, still from outside the system. I talk about he had one leg inside the system and two arms and another leg outside. And Donald Trump as a nominee. If you think about it, Donald Trump ran against 16 or 17, well more than a dozen established candidates from the establishment that I indicated just a few slides ago, no one really sure. Okay? So I think that's how we could have got here. Now, there weren't enough younger voters in the Democratic primary to push Sanders all the way through. So instead, Democrats nominated an establishment figure now running against an anti-establishment figure, somebody who got it all create the talent like this. And it shouldn't be surprising at all that Trump is using social media to gain attention. Okay? In fact, his past record, if you do just a quick analysis of his history on social media, all of the signs, all of the pre-testing of the strategy is evident for everyone to see. The more that he tweeted mean things in America, the more attention he received. Okay? Ariana Huffington from the Huffington Post. He mentioned back in 2012, a long time ago, that he said she's unattractive both inside and out. I fully understand why her former husband left her for a man. He made a good decision. Okay? He received 4,700 likes, 5,500 tweeted it. 5,500 people retweeted that. So you know, is anybody in this room on Twitter or Facebook? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Right? A lot of people are. So we all know that when we post something and our friends like it, we want to post something. We know we know what that feels like. You know, you have a little bit of adrenaline. You know that you've connected with someone. This is the same sort of phenomenon that other folks have. Certainly in the case of Trump, he didn't stop there. For some reason, he tweeted that he's never seen a thin person drinking Diet Coke. These are divisive statements. Okay. This is something that he tweeted back in 2013 about American military. 26,000 unreported sexual assaults in the military, only a couple hundred convictions. What do these geniuses, talking to the establishment, expect when they put men and women together? Very interesting comment relative to the comments that have come up the last 3 or 4 days too, right, in the relationship between men and women. Okay? So no one should be surprised when you look through just basic history of his Twitter account that he has an audience for these kinds of views. You can see here 8,400. So the closer he gets to running, the more excitement he's seeing on his Twitter feed. Okay? And the last one, when people responded negatively, he says, "Sorry, losers and haters, but my IQ is one of the highest, and you all know it!" Exclamation point. Please don't feel so stupid or insecure if I can fall. Almost 50,000 retweets. Okay? Establishing his audience. Running a campaign like no one's ever seen before. So when he announced his candidacy back in, I think it was May, maybe June of 2015, this is how he started. Mexican immigrants come to our country with drugs, rapists, some movie people. So the point was, in the very first formal introduction as a candidate, he used some of the tactics that I've been using on Twitter. Okay? And it really seems to work. In fact, there was a study conducted by another center at the Kennedy School of Harvard, the Schroederstein Center, which analyzed all of the media attention, okay, for all of the candidates running for office. In between the beginning of the campaign in July, when we had the 2 conventions, a couple of things noteworthy, one of which is he received more attention than anyone else. He actually received more positive attention than anyone else, other than Bernie Sanders. So he received almost half of all the weekly coverage on average when he ended hitting into conventions. And then you can see that 49% of that coverage was positive. Okay. 47% of Clinton's coverage is positive. So Trump was number 2, only the Sanders was 54%. Okay. He did it. He created this movement of some kind, right? And this excitement within the Republican Party, but actually, without spending a lot of money, completely created a brand new architecture for running a campaign. He spent only $69 million on the campaign, essentially a third of what Hillary Clinton spent, and over a couple $100 million, and a quarter of what Sanders spent. Okay, just creating this without costing them a lot of money. So here we are, okay? Here we are today in the final month of this campaign, and essentially we can see that the Hillary Clinton's campaign is running on a theme, okay, that we're stronger together as Americans, trying to unite, not divide people, and she's making it as clear as she can that Donald Trump doesn't have the temperament to be Commander-in-Chief President of the United States. That's essentially the theme of her campaign. Donald Trump's theme, his message, is that he's running on a theme to make America great again, and that crooked Hillary is a liar and can't be trusted. Okay? But really, neither one of these candidates are trusted by the American people. Both of which, when you conduct surveys, have their favorability numbers are far exceed their unfavorable number. And when I look at this campaign, it's still evolving on a daily basis. But just as a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump had only placed $3 million worth of advertising, okay, compared to Hillary Clinton spending $123 million in advertising. So again, very, very different kind of campaigns that they're running. One's on social and one's on traditional. This is, for me, up until the last couple of weeks, the most significant television commercial and really emblematic of the commercials that Hillary Clinton is running. 30 seconds.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. And you can tell them to go themselves. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
You gotta see this guy, oh, I don't know what I said, oh, I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember.
Our children and grandchildren will look back at this time, at the choices we are about to make, the goals we will strive for, the principles we will live by, and we need to make sure that they can be proud of us. I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
Okay, so has anybody seen that commercial before? Okay, if you live in the United States, you've seen it many, many times. Now, Donald Trump's commercials, you don't see them on TV, okay? You see them on your Facebook page, you see them on Instagram, you see them on Snapchat. So that was her very traditional 30-second comparative ad, right? This is an example of one of many ads that you see if you went to Donald Trump's Instagram or Facebook page. It's going to be more difficult for her to be trusted if people understand that she's raised so much money from Wall Street. So that's a very, very, I think, kind of impactful ad. The last ad I want to show you quickly is happened just the last couple of weeks. Okay, when he tried to expand the franchise. Okay, and young voters, women are important segments of this electorate. This is an ad I think that he put together pretty quickly a few weeks ago. So first, see if there's something very unique about this ad, and perhaps you can help me identify.
This weekend, Mother Teresa is being canonized by Pope Francis, receiving sainthood for her amazing life of charity and holiness. Mother Teresa gave food to the hungry, shelter to the homeless, education to the needy. She represented the best in each of us. I'm truly happy to see Catholics across the world join together and celebrate Mother Teresa's uniquely humble, generous, and pious life. There was nobody like her.
I don't think I would have predicted that Mother Teresa element of this campaign. Okay. We did the best we can with predicting that, but I wouldn't have predicted. Catholic vote is very important swing vote, reaching out to women, etc. I thought it was worth mentioning. So essentially, kind of that's kind of where we are. We'll save some other comments for the Q&A around the two debates. But I think that despite all these things, I have faulted both campaigns for not really empowering the most important, most impactful potential to vote in this country, in my country, which is the millennial vote, the youth vote. We'll have more people under the age of 30 vote than people over the age of 65. And although I think Clinton in the last couple of weeks has made inroads into this community, I don't think either campaign has really kind of spent as much time and attention as I think they should to empower them to make sure they're part of the system. And because of that, okay, with just a few weeks left, I believe that the future of America kind of sits in the hands of millennials. And almost every survey that I look at, whether it's a national survey or surveys of some of the swing states, millennials, people between 18 and 30, 18 and 35, are the least likely to have a firm decision, most likely to be undecided and content. Okay? And I've talked a lot about these, about their feelings, but the relationship with the government is fractured. You know, half do not support capitalism, half believe the American dream is dead, and essentially half don't have faith in the American justice system. Okay? Very, very difficult for establishment politicians, okay, to connect with people who have such visceral negative reactions towards the way in which the country has been governed for the better part of their lifetime. 4 out of 5 say significant reform is needed. A third just wants to hit a reset button and start again. I recently gave a similar presentation in Europe. I got off the airplane. The first thing I saw is Smash Capitalism Now. That's really kind of resonates, I think, with so many young Americans today. So I've been spending a lot of time in events like this, but also talking to the campaigns to indicate that if you really want to connect with millennials, watch this debate, see the degree to which the candidates mentioned these 5 basically ideas. Okay, those 5 ideas are kind of the mandate that young people want to see. We want to have candidates who will grow the economy, help us reduce terrorism, unite Americans, inspire this post 9/11 sense that Americans and Republicans were united, deal with inequality, and reduce the role of big money in politics. So that's the agenda people are seeking. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share some initial thoughts. And hopefully you can now have a deeper appreciation for the degree to which Donald Trump has been able to kind of capture a significant part of the American electorate. I don't think it's 50%. I don't think it's 45% at this point, but certainly kind of tens of millions, maybe 40, maybe 50 million Americans really kind of are part of this Trump phenomenon. So I'll leave it now for Dr. Chung, and thank you for your attention.
The second speaker this morning is Dr. Robert Chung. Of course, Dr. Chung really needs no introduction. He is perhaps the best known and most authoritative academic who's in fact, probably in this part of the world. He is a man of integrity. I don't think he has any particular axe to grind, and I respect his courage. He first gained prominence when the then chief executive, C.H. Tung, tried to stop him from running his regular post on the public perception of the chief executive of Hong Kong. Since then, he's done many posts, highly respected and independent, as well as I think Dr. Chung.
Thank you, Theo, for your very, very kind words. Yes, I feel fortunate myself to be still here, to be still running surveys in this university and this part of the world. We have just heard John sharing his observations and of course a little bit of introduction of the so-called Trump phenomenon. The USA or US presidential election is only 4 weeks from now, exactly 4 weeks from now. So that's why we pick a Tuesday. Sorry, that's a joke, but Tuesday is the big day for America. So remember, 4 weeks from now. But for Hong Kong, the Legislative Council election is a bygone. It was held a month ago, more than a month ago. So it's probably a little bit different for me really to react or bridge myself with what John has been presenting to you. Number one, of course, is a time question, is something in the past and something in the future. But I guess on the more important side is really the level of elections that we are talking about. The presidential election is the election for the president, okay? So I believe all of us agree that the United States is a very, very powerful democratic society. But now in Hong Kong, we're just talking about legislative council election. Of course, we're having a chief executive election. Is it an election? But say it's an election next March. But it's nothing about universal suffrage. So we're really talking about different orders of things. So how do we bridge each other together? I don't know. Perhaps in our discussion later on, we could perhaps reflect on each other's progress into different societies. But what I am doing now, or trying to do now, is to really tell the audience, and especially for John a little bit, about the Hong Kong story. Now, I think most of us know Hong Kong, the so-called Hong Kong story well enough. So I will try to be quick. And of course, in the event posters or the publicities that we have put out, we have explicitly said or hoped that at the end of the day, we would be bringing home some points on our reflections, the panel's reflections, on the role of opinion polling in all societies, especially in regard to electoral engineering. So how the candidates, how society, how the media actually make use of all these polls. And I will assert that we are lacking professional standards in Hong Kong. So we are facing a lot of problems, and I'm telling you the problems in 2 areas very soon. So maybe it's time that we should discuss what should happen next, at least for us in Hong Kong, and with the lessons learned from the States. So I will just bring you very quickly through 2 stories which I'd like to share with you about the electoral election that we have just conducted. And that is the really so-called rolling poll. In the States, it's called a tracking poll. It's usually called a tracking poll, but we in this part of the world are quite familiar with the term rolling poll now. And then I will talk a little bit about the exit polling. The story about rolling polling is very simple. You could click on our webpage, just click on the feature page, and you can see a lot of information there. I have captured some graphs from that website. If it is an election to be held, these charts will be very, very interesting. But the election is gone, it's bygone. So we're just looking at a kind of history. So I will not go to the ups and downs, the candidates, the name of the candidates themselves, but just to show you that the result of our rolling poll, meaning that we're running polls every day during the campaign period, and we have been running all these polls and releasing them on a daily basis. And so what can we get out of those polls? I think one key question for us, and also for our American friends, would be how accurate are the polls, especially the pre-election polls. Are we predicting Hillary to win? Because I just read last night that she's leading a comfortable margin, put it this way, after the 2 debates. One occurred yesterday. So presumably, if we are going to put on a bet now, we should bet on Hillary, whether you like her or not. But are these really the reality? And will the polls be accurate? That is the question for all of us. And we too are pollsters. So we've been challenged, I think, throughout our career. Are your polls accurate? So I don't know, but if you just look at this one single chart first, this is about voters' propensity to vote. I don't think the local media, Hong Kong media, pay attention to it. We were basically mapping Hong Kong electors, the voters in Hong Kong. How keen were they coming out to vote? A very simple question, isn't it? And we know throughout the years that the figures could not be accurate. Because if you look at the latest figure, 2016, this year, you can see that the latest data point we had was 86% claiming that they would vote. But we of course do not have that, we just have 30-something%, right? So it has to be explained. But I'm not going to explain it now, perhaps we could discuss it. But the chart for this year's rolling poll, when we compare it to 3 previous rolling polls for the legislative election, using the same methodology, we already got one prediction correct, bingo. That is, the turnout rate for this election was record high compared to all 3 legislative elections. So it depends on how you read it. And I'm not going to defend myself, but I'm showing to you what we had released before the election. It shows that people were very keen to vote this time. And if you're running election campaigning or strategic voting, calling for strategic voting, you should be looking at who are those key people. Were they new voters? Were they old voters? Whom do they support? Well, that should be the question you ask. But we didn't ask that because we are not election engineers, so we just showed you the chart, but I would have to say, well, that is one reality that we predicted correct. But of course, it was not bothered. So let me go to the 5 GC, so-called geographic constituencies. Now, if you were on the day before the election, that is September the 3rd, and you dare to look at our website, then you probably could see these and digest it. The charts are very complicated. If you go to the website, you could just select 1 or 2 candidates. But we are showing you, or I'm showing you here, just the top 6 candidates of the Hong Kong Island constituency, because we had 6 seats for this constituency. So I show you the top 6. So you can see the so-called movements or popularities starting from the campaign period, that means the end of nomination, up to the second last day of the campaign period, and you could see all these up and downs. Now you could go into the legend and see were we correct, were we not correct, but I'll show you a bit more about that. So this is Hong Kong Island. Just keep this kind of figure in your mind that these are the ups and downs, and the top has remained the top throughout. The second start from the second and also end up with the second, but there are ups and downs in between. And you go to the Kowloon East, you all see these waverings, up and downs at the beginning, especially. Okay, Kowloon West, New Territory East, New Territory West. Okay, now I'm not going to analyze all these whole shares. It's very complicated. It should be discussed at another occasion or perhaps later on. But what you have been seeing with all these rolling charts, I hope you will have the feeling that somebody is monitoring public sentiment very closely on a day-to-day basis. You believe it or not, it's up to you. Well, we have scientific backup behind it. But whether you believe it is one question. But of course, whether they're accurate would be another question. And I'm specifically showing you this anti-West chart with a highlight. That's Eddie Chu Haiding. Okay. So this candidate in this constituency became a legend. Okay. So if we have a Donald Trump phenomenon, we probably should analyze the Eddie Chu phenomenon in Hong Kong. Different level of candidates, different level of elections, but this was the talking point immediately after the election. Of course, the poll itself was one part of the story. People asked, well, Eddie got the highest vote. Now, he has the second popularity here. He got the highest number of votes in this constituency, the king of the candidates, Pure Wong. Did we predicted it? Did we know it beforehand? Well, I'm showing you. Well, we didn't, but we predicted that he was sure win. That was against quite a number of odds, because he started very low. If you look at the chart, his chart, the beginning of his popularity was much less than 5%, 4%, 3%. But then it went up to almost 15, okay? So by the mere fact that this rolling poll shows you that this candidate, Zhu Huaye, was not a high favor at the beginning of the poll, becoming the second sure win candidate, already tells you something, that you have to keen in analyzing him. You should be doing it at least a week before. Right? It's not just after. Now after, people would say, well, why he won? Then there are a lot of stories, okay, but he stands for some important imagery of what happened during the election process. But this is the so-called highlight that I would like to show you. And you look at the very nitty-gritties, and you would be able to see a lot of so-called hidden pictures in the rolling polls, even before the election. Now, this is nothing interesting. It's the so-called 超級區議會, a church-wide constituency, basically a functional constituency made democratic. But if you look at all these flow charts, at least I think you could detect one difference. The popularity fluctuations weren't there. It was very stable in terms of popularity, right, compared to the previous 5 charts. Then again, this shows you a little bit of abstraction and reality. What's happening here is different from the geopolitical constituencies. Were we accurate? Now you will study it. But I would say not quite. Yes and no. Because this points to one important story of the Hong Kong legislative election last month. Because popularity structure was so stable in the district council functional constituency, the super DC constituency, people began to call for strategic voting. Because as the campaigner, you do not want the winners to win so many votes. You want to share a little bit with your second priority candidates. So that comes the strategic voting. And strategic voting somehow in Hong Kong for the past electoral election, and probably in future electoral election, has become more and more important. And this somehow poses a great challenge to pollsters like me. Because if you were very active on the very last day of your projection, then the day on the election, people will say, don't vote according to the polls, because the polls said you are sure win candidate. Please share some of the votes away. And that destroys the final reality, isn't it? It's a very interactive process, and this deserves a lot of study. And there are, of course, people yelling that, well, this is unfair because pollsters are affecting reality. But of course, if I could defend it, I'm not going to do it. But I would have to say that the prediction of polls in Hong Kong is a little bit different from the States, because there's this strategic voting at the end, 1 or 2 days. It interacts with the poll findings, and it makes things very, very difficult. Nevertheless, in spite of that, I'm here for the first time to show you a very rough analysis of how accurate was our rolling poll for the last poll. So it's a very complicated picture, but if you're a Hong Kong audience, then you know that when we release our rolling poll data, we release all the percentages. We will also test the so-called significance of the leads, and then stamp a label for every candidate. And there were basically 5 labels. We used 5 different labels, so sort of 5-point scale. So for some candidates, we calculated according to our polls that they have gone beyond the comfortable margin, put it that way. Then we put a high odds. They would take time, okay? He or she has high odds to be elected. So we have this projection, first category. Second category of higher chance, 大啲機會較大。Equal chances, you know, okay. Chances are lower. We didn't show the fifth category basically means no chance of winning, okay? There are just too many of them, so we just forget them. So if you look at this table, the simple way would be to look at the, let me use the overall. So amongst all the candidates who competed in the 5 geographical constituencies, and we added the Super DC in as well, we have named 11 candidates as having high odds of winning. And they, all of them won, okay? So understand that. So shall we say we called 11 candidates as winners, and they all got into the electoral. Then we have in the second category called 4 candidates labeled as having higher chances of winning, and you could see that finally they all got in. So 4 out of 4, and you could say 100%. So technically, the tips for you for 4 years later would be, if you call any candidate to be of higher chances or absolutely high chance of getting into the electoral, then they should have been, it would be elected, okay? And the fifth category, which I have not shown, is that if we say there's no chance to get into the electoral, there's no chance, because they're not here, I don't even bother to show them, okay? What about the fourth category, lower chances? Now, when we label them as having less or low chances of getting into the electoral, then they won't get elected, irrespective of all those strategic voting at the end, okay? But the problem is, we have called 39 candidates as equal chance, or we cannot call, very simple. Then 25 out of them actually got elected, and the percentage was 64. Are you happy with that? Is that an accurate prediction? I don't know. I would say if it is a really accurate prediction, it should be 50-50, right? 64 is already tipped or skewed towards the positive side. And this shows that it's not a statistical matter, it's really a safety margin issue. We prefer to call when we are a little bit more safe. So we've shown that 64% is actually on the safe side. So if we call you as half-half, then you're not half-half, but you're 6-4, 64, 60% yes, 40% no. So this is the rolling poll if you look at the very, very last point. We care about the first point, or first week or the second week, because things have been very dynamic and we deliberately did not use a large sample in the beginning. Actually, it's because of resources. Okay, so that's a bit about rolling poll. How about the exit polls? Now, on exit poll, Hong Kong story goes, I think, on one dimension, whether they're partisan or non-partisan. And I hesitated whether to show you this clip, but yesterday I know John will be showing the audio and video clips. So yes, let me be brave and show you this clip. So you will see this. I think our interpreters should start to work, because the clip would be in. Yes. So, ready for interpretation?
民建聯議員鍾樹根透露，上屆立法會選舉，民建聯透過票站調查配票。但翻查資料，民建聯並冇申請進行票站調查。而進行調查嘅機構，如果喺投票結束之前向候選人透露結果，咁就係違反指引。司劉就用。2012年立法會選舉，民建聯喺港島出兩張名單，曾鈺成同鍾樹根分別攞到3萬幾票，雙雙入到議會。而工聯會嘅黃國興就以27000幾票攞到最尾一席。鍾樹根憶述當日入夜已經冇拉票，仲叫工作人員轉為支持黃國興。肯定自己6點鐘就真係夠票啦，嘅話都差唔多啦，即係最後做結果。其實都票站調查我哋自己有做。翻查2012年票站調查嘅機構名單並冇包括民建聯。 會有唔公平。選舉事務處通常唔會批准有成員參選嘅組織做票站調查。而上屆申請做票站調查嘅包括港大民意研究計劃、香港研究協會等等，全部都要簽承諾書，喺投票結束之前唔可以直接或者間接向任何候選人發放調查結果。究竟民建聯點解會用到票站調查去票？葉國謙嘅回應淨係得呢句：有咩？我都唔知道。而相關事件也是林秋報道。
Okay. Right, so that's the clip. 其實我想而家講廣東話。I speak in Chinese for a while. I think for the clip that you have just watched, if I have not listened to our SI, but if you missed a bit about that, it's just simply a candidate, electoral candidate, for the last election, admitting that he had used exit poll for election engineering. That's simple enough. Okay, so that is the cable TV news clip, and here is the Chinese newspaper. 蘋果日報今年嘅報導 ，SI 準備好啊！我係講少少廣東話，因為等佢哋有嘢做。喺今次蘋果日報嘅報導裏邊咧，其實好多報紙都有報導㗎啦。今年6月嘅時候咧，鍾志斌咧係喺電台節目裏邊咧係自己承認咗，當年咧係有票站調查嘅資料，然後後來咧係用嚟做配票嘅。咁我呢度想俾大家睇嘅咧，就係今日開眼界嘅啫，因為之前我都係未發表嘅，收起嘅。就係其實都係公開㗎啦。就係選舉事務處咧喺今年8月31號咧，就有一個信件同埋一個電郵咧係俾我哋民意研究計劃嘅。我哋當時咧已經申請咗係做今年嘅票站調查。呢個大概咁講嘅，即係 It's in English, John, you could perhaps read it. That's from the Electoral Office of Hong Kong. 呢個信件咧就係咁樣同我講嘅，就係話選舉事務處咧大概咧就咁講啦得悉你哋嘅民意研究計劃咧，港大民意研究計劃咧，近來咧就有同民間團體啦，包括傳媒啦，同埋 Civic Organisation 呢個民間團體咧，就係合作咧有做一個滾動調查喎。咁其他就唔講落去啦。跟住選舉事務處咧又覺得，而家咧我係需要提醒下大家，就係話咧喺關於票站調查對選舉是否構成公平咧，我哋表示關注我哋不嬲都表示關注㗎啦。所以而家咧，我哋選舉事務處咧就善意提醒你哋唔該喺選舉當日咧如果你係做票站調查嘅話咧，係要遵從指引。咁呢個就其實裏面仲有好多嘅，好客氣嘅，好客氣嘅。咁只係提醒下我哋啫。不過邏輯上咧，我都諗咗好耐，佢為什麼要提醒我哋咧？今年因為我哋每一次都講得好清楚，我哋一個好獨立嘅機構係唔會用票站調查做任何選舉工程嘅咁但係選舉事務處今年咧，可能大家講得多啦就於是提點下我哋。於是咧，我就覆咗封信俾佢，都好匆忙嘅，因為就嚟選舉啦嘛，係咪？突然間攞到個提示，咁我亦都希望選舉事務處咧係提示所有做票站調查嘅機構，我亦都冇去問佢哋，只不過咧我就咁樣答咗佢嘅。呢封信咧我係完整咁樣公開，因為我嘅寫嘅信件選舉事務處咧我截錄得㗎啦不過咧呢個當然應該係屬於公開嘅資料。簡單嚟講咧，就係我寫咗堆嘅説話啦，就係話唔需要擔心，我哋不嬲咁多年來咧都唔會進行選舉工程嘅票站調查。不過既然你問到啦，今次我有4個附錄交俾選舉事務處，請你考慮跟進，係考慮跟進，唔跟進亦都冇乜所謂。 但係裏面4個咧，如果第時慢慢睇咧，係包括頭先大家見到喺媒體上邊有候選人上次話有做票站調查嘅，所以我亦都節錄咗報章嘅報導同埋以往嘅文件，其實好多年來都係咁講。我自己係懷疑有機構咧係不當咁用票站調查。既然選舉事務處今次咁認真不如都睇睇會唔會答我，明我意思啦嗬？隔咗一段，佢真係答我好開心。選舉後9月7號大日子，就不過係我收到電郵嘅回覆咧，暫時都未收到正式嘅信件啊，因為第一封咧就好認真簽債，有晒抬頭。不過都唔緊要，字裏行間我又引述一啲佢亦都係答得好客氣嘅，即係我亦都用紅字表示咗一啲佢嘅重點。佢就話我哋選舉事務處咧，一如以往好關注票站調查嘅效用㗎啦。我哋特別咧係選舉委員會咧 EAC 咧係好關注到喺票站附近嘅秩序啊。呢個我研究咗好耐，佢係寫緊乜嘢？因為個論點係乜嘢？咁我諗我明咗係佢講乜嘢，就係話選舉委員會咧不嬲都好關注票站附近嘅秩序。所以如果票站調查構成秩序上邊嘅混亂咧，一定要做一啲東西咁樣其次咧就係講緊 publication and broadcast， 即係話喺選舉未完之前發表票站調查數據，會唔會構成一啲咩問題咧？呢兩點我哋關注嘅。所以我估基於呢兩點關注咧，佢大家都講咗，佢平衡咗票站調查裏邊牽涉嘅言論自由學術自由新聞自由同埋maintain order 票站秩序之後咧，選舉事務處於是做咗好多情況我其實好開心嘅，不過又唔係幾開心，因為咧我不嬲去講票站調查應唔應該做應該發放咧，唔係秩序咁簡單，而係會唔會構成選舉不公平啫？而家票站調查點樣處理已經講咗，同埋咧選舉事務處都話近年咧15年開始咧，佢哋更加認真啊！我哋知，因為我哋每次申請都知，要有法律上邊嘅保障律師見證，然後有乜事咧會告你刑事責任添我哋都好願意見到呢個發展。不過最後我應該咁講，最後嗰句 We trust the enhanced arrangement 係能夠幫助到香港有 open, honest and fair election。呢個係第一次。即係我認為呢個 open, honest and fair 如果能夠喺呢個正式嘅票站調查發展係擺出嚟咧，好重要啦。因為票站秩序井有條咧，唔等於係 fair， 因為數據好公開，好小心，好有秩序嘅攞，但係使用嘅時候好隱蔽，或者係某啲機器可以見到，某啲人見唔到，公眾見唔到，有其他人喺選舉期間見到，呢個就係唔公平啦。honest 與唔 honest 咧，即係是否誠實咧，就係話，如果背後真係做一啲選舉工程而喺幕前係唔知嘅，甚至訪員唔知、研究員唔知、分析員唔知，不過個數據可能喺某啲地方可以用某啲用途嘅，就唔使講俾大家聽嘅，呢個係會構成一個問題。呢個咧就係選舉委員會同埋選舉事務處最後單我嘅地方。好啦，咁所以咧，我就俾大家睇下喺2012年嘅時候咧。Okay, I think I should switch to English. In 2012, that was the time we last conducted professional exit polling, for the general electoral election. So I'm just showing you some of the pictures, how we operated. I've went to the States for many times, observed the exit poll operation is very, very different, but perhaps John will explain that later on, but it's very, very different. So we conduct our polls outside the polling station, not inside the polling station. In this case, it's the exit right inside the polling station. Okay, so that's how we operated. And you've seen how accurate we were with the rolling polls. So I'm here showing you how accurate we were with the predictions of the exit polls. So you now know how to read all these. So after the 2012 September election, right at the close of poll, 10:30 p.m., we made this call of projections. So we projected 9 candidates with high odds, and they all got elected. We projected 10 more candidates with high chances of elected, and they all got elected. And for those with lower chances, no chance at all, they never elected in. So it's only the 35 candidates, which we said they have so-called fair chance before half and half. 21 got elected, there's a 60%, and that this all is pretty much like a rolling poll. Now after 10:30, we still process the data. So at 11:30, we make another projection, or corrected the projection. The votes were not counted yet. So these were the figures. We have 185, 58. And finally at 1 o'clock, before we actually have the return of the votes, we again did a calculation, and then we see these figures. So it's 100%, 08%, 59%. So these were the so-called accuracy figures, not the percentages, but the calls, number of calls correct. Now, this year, we have given up, because of all these election engineering issues, we have given up conducting exit polls. But we still ask a group of students to run student projects. But we never touched the data on election poll, on election day. Actually, we didn't touch it a few days afterwards. So we didn't know. We just do not know the data. We didn't bother to do projections, and we didn't bother even to bet how accurate we were. But afterwards, we did that. And you can see that this time, we have a very smaller number of operations. But still, if we were using our student data, not quite professional, to run a projection at, say, 10:30 that evening, then we could still do this. Now, of course, we didn't run a projection, but we are simulating the statistical procedure that we have been using. If we were running it this year, then probably you have this percentage. 21 high odds call, 5 higher chances call, and middle is really 50-50. This is very fortunate for us, but the rest would be 0. So this really ends with the exit poll with a question. Should we be running exit polls? Were we accurate? What is the point of running exit polls? Well, we could discuss that. But before we conclude, or I conclude, I'll just show you one set of statistics which shows you the problems that we have been facing. The response rate of exit polls. We run interviews outside the polling stations, and I've calculated the 2004, 2016, that's a span of 12 years. You can see that response rate started 2004 with 66.7, so it's 67, so 2/3, 2 out of 3 people whom we attempted to interview actually gave us an answer that was pretty, I would say, acceptable, otherwise we wouldn't be that accurate. But then this figure dropped to 50, 60, and then it also continued to drop, and this year I have only 55. Now this has to do with the so-called credibility, public credibility of the exit polls themselves. And I have to say that we have seen a dropping response rate, and even the figures themselves, when we look at how highly or how credible they are, they're also dropping. It was because of the contamination by partisan exit posters, which affected our operation. And this year we just didn't do it. And we didn't really have the resources to do it. So should we be running exit polls? I end with this global picture. This is a 2012 global survey. One data point or one return means one country. So for Hong Kong, you could see we have here, we do not have blackout period before election. That means we could publish election polls anytime we like, okay? So no embargo. But in China, there's no embargo because there's no poll there. Okay? So they're clean. But you see Macau and Taiwan, they have embargo. So Taiwan is 10 days. Okay, there's long embargo period. But for exit polling, Hong Kong's exit polling is actually banned inside the polling stations. Okay, so here's where we are. In the States, there will be no restrictions. There are some restrictions, but the States will probably click yeah. Okay? And if you compare us, I mean Hong Kong, and of course our Greater China region with the world, then you can see that, well, we didn't quite completely ban it, but we are banned inside a polling station, so we are probably one of the 40% of the world. And if you add the 8%, then perhaps one of the 50%. So we are as free as half of the world, the other half is freer than us. So that's where Hong Kong stands. Now, of course, I have to say China is completely free because there's no election. So finally, I asked these questions. Should we be continuing exit polls? We didn't do it this time. I think we should, but I'm very hesitant to whether to redo it again. But I think exit polls is a symbol of free society. And exit polls, which are conducted by academics and independent media, should be seen as a very important source of non-partisan information, and I think that is important. And for Hong Kong in particular, we have been running exit polls and of course rolling polls as academic units, and that is a little bit different from the States, and John will tell you, I think, that there are three types of polls: media poll, academic polls, and also election campaign polls. But in Hong Kong, basically, we do not have media polls. We have media-sponsored polls, but conducted by academia. So we're seeing a Hong Kong model here, and I think this neutrality and the academia plus media cooperation is really a reflection of the middle force of our society, and I think this, to me, is a very important element or test of the success for one country, two systems. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
We'll now have a discussion. First of all, the three of us, and then I will invite you to join in. If you have questions or views, you will have the opportunity to express. I would first of all like to put one question to John. That is, you tend to attribute the fact that Donald Trump is phenomenal, so the fact that he is as popular as he is now, because he tells it like it is. It's the expression I learned in the United States, telling it like it is. You know, something might be politically incorrect, but he would still say, well, we have that in Hong Kong as well. There is a certain Miss Yao who is going to be a legislative councillor, and she tells it like this. And she's also very popular. Is that a new phenomenon?
I think it is, and I think it's probably a phenomenon that isn't unique to the United States, as you mentioned. And there's a sense of losing one's control over their situation. Right? That when I showed those economic numbers, and when I shared those anecdotes from the focus groups of good people who work really hard, who feel like they're losing control of their daily life and themselves, and they have kind of less control over their connection to the community and to the country. But the one thing they do, one of the few things they can control, is the way in which they think and they should talk. So as they put more emphasis on their sense of freedom of expressing themselves, even if it may be considered to be not appropriate conversation, or maybe an insult to other people. So the degree to which you're losing, your sense of control in the society, I think that element is of not being politically correct is more relevant than ever.
Is this more prominent among certain social economic groups? Is this age related? I mean, do you have more of this in the South, for instance?
It's a good question. It's not related to age as much as related to kind of socioeconomic factors. So it's like a lot of unfortunately, we can now predict your likelihood of voting, but also who you vote for based on whether or not you have a higher degree from a college, whether or not you're white. So I think the sense of lack of political correctness is from the folks who have been frankly left behind, from the economic growth that we've seen. Those folks typically are less likely to have a four-year college degree, and specifically those folks who are more likely to be men and white. So you have white men with a college degree, really angry. In fact, and I can't dispute their case that that the political system, whether Democrats or Republicans, really haven't been as attentive as in some ways as I think they should be to the economic plight that we see in so many places across America.
The surprise, of course, is that you now have in the United States presidential election 2 70-year-old candidates, when the bulk of the problem, college debt, losing jobs and so on, are the people.
I think that this, if I'm not mistaken, I think this will be the first, certainly the first modern political election where we will go backwards in terms of choosing somebody from a generation that is older than the generation of the current president. I think this is the first time. But I do want to say that I don't think there's any correlation between age and the value of ideas. Bernie Sanders, resonated incredibly well with millennials, and he was older, I think, than the other two candidates. It's because he was authentic, he came from outside the system, he had simple ideas that I think young people, and a lot of other people, but specifically young people, felt were at the heart of what the problems were with America. So it's just not about what year you were born, it's more about the background that you come from, inside, outside the system, and the discussion and the ideas.
We have a different kind of situation here in Hong Kong, Dr. Zhou. In that we have seen in this election just concluded the emergence of young people and young politicians. They're getting intellectual, they come with different ideas. Is that not true?
Yes, definitely. I think.
Did you predict this?
Well, if you look at Eddie Chu, he's very young, and we predicted before the election that he's going to win. And if you really look at all those candidates with higher odds before the election predicted by us, I think we already got the image that the young people, a lot of young people, will be getting into the election. And then we have the results, final results. And we were actually seeing more young people than we actually predicted. Of course, there was this final day election, strategic voting, that's all of them. But that, of course, brings to the very important comparison between what will happen in your country in 4 weeks' time, because whoever is going to be elected will be pretty aged, shall we say, senior. but in Hong Kong, we are actually seeing this torch being relayed to the young people. I mean, the politicians, the electoral members themselves, deliberately trying to push the younger generation to become electoral members, and they succeeded. Most of them succeeded. And by that, they actually motivated a lot of young people into voting as well. But that's not happening in the US election, right?
No, and that's, the overall mission of our work at Institute of Politics generally, this is one of 2 living memorials to President Kennedy, one of which is his library, the second of which is our center. And the objective that we seek is to kind of inspire young people into a life of public service. And unfortunately, our work started in 2000. So let me talk about just our time of the last 16 years. Before 2001, when we started 2000, it looked like today that you have very few people interested in voting, probably less than 1 or 2. But we had about 2/3 of college students, a significant number of non-college students in America volunteer in their community to make their community better. They might be feeding hungry people, they might be educating folks in schools, or doing a variety of different things. They just didn't have a lot of trust in the system back in 2000 to actually go out and vote. Okay? September 11th changed that. The only bright spot, to the extent that you even mentioned that came out of 2001, is that young people really became kind of interested in politics. They could see the tangible effects of one candidate versus another candidate. And for the course of 2002, 2004, 2006, 2008, you had an increase in political participation in the voting. Okay? Expectations were raised potentially at an unreasonable level, and those expectations weren't met. We had a Great Recession, and participation has now dropped significantly in the 3 elections since Obama's in 2008, and I think we're being about the same place now. So unfortunately, we see young people interested in traditional service. Having said that, you have more young people volunteer which is harder than voting because it takes more time and more effort. So it's not that they're apathetic about their country, they just don't have a lot of trust that any one of the major parties or major candidates could actually affect the kind of change that they're seeking.
Would I be right in thinking that the millennials, the Facebook generation, the better educated, the college students, they are the most difficult group to win over in the United States? I mean, would it, for instance, make sense to you if I said, if I were a college student in the United States today, I wouldn't vote for either candidate. I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, and I would stay away from the electoral process altogether.
I think that's without question. There are a lot of, they are the hardest generation to reach. They are very, very cynical. Traditional campaigns have a hard time reaching them. So one of the problems is, oftentimes they don't even bother. You know, they don't even bother, and we believe that voting is a learned behavior. So that's very, very difficult. So Barack Obama's campaign in 2008 knew strategically that the only chance of him to win that primary was to expand the electorate. Okay, if you had the same voters who always vote, he knew, and we knew collectively from analyzing that Hillary Clinton would win. So he had no other choice other than to identify, empower, and challenge tens of millions of young people across the country to participate. If not for young people, it dated back in Iowa, the first caucus, in January 2008, if not for young people, which 55% voted for Obama, 10% voted for Hillary. You know, Hillary Clinton would be president today, okay? But Obama won that vote 5-1, and everybody over the age of 30, he lost. Okay? So it's just a handful of young people, and frankly, for better or worse, change the shape of America and essentially the world. And that's the message, that it will come down to a handful of young people in Florida, in New Hampshire, in Ohio. The concern I have is whether or not they'll participate, whether or not this campaign is so negative that they might just stay home. And I think over the last couple of weeks that the election from young people really isn't about Clinton versus Trump. I think Trump is essentially kind of tapped out in where he is with the youth vote, less than 30%. It's really a choice of Hillary Clinton versus Gary Johnson versus staying home, sitting on the bench. That's really kind of what we're focused on for the last few weeks.
The CNN poll after the last television debate gave Hillary Clinton a 57% lead over Donald Trump's 34%. Now, that's a huge margin. I cannot see how he could overcome that. Do you?
So that, just so everybody knows, that is the poll result that came out regarding who won the debate. Okay. So that is of the people who were watching. Okay. More people who watch it were likely Democrats and Republicans. Of the people watching it, who do they think won? 57% said Hillary won. 34% said Trump won. Essentially means, okay, my interpretation of that is that not a lot of minds were changed.
Okay.
The polling, if you look at the last week, indicates, and there was a poll that came out today from NBC News, which indicates that the effect of the video audio tape that was released over the weekend, Hillary will extend her lead to 10, 11 points. A very, very big lead for Trump to overcome in just a month. Very big.
So on this question of debates, TV debates, and we're talking about millennials, I do have this important question for you. And this very, it's a Hong Kong story, a very special Hong Kong story. We also have TV debates or forums, but to me, they are just jokes. Because you've seen sometimes more than a dozen, not candidates, but candidate lists. Okay, each list could have many candidates all standing there alike. But every one of them will be given equal time of speaking. Now in America, we watch the presidential debates twice, and this is the third one. There were only 2 candidates. But if you go to the polls, you are not given just the option of selecting 2 presidential candidates, but at least 2 dozen. To some states, it could be as many as 2 dozen or more. But the third candidate, or the fourth and fifth, never appear in TV debates. In Hong Kong, we're seeing all these people, everyone who have the ability of paying the deposit will be there, publicizing himself or herself. And the good side is, of course, is equal time, justice, fair. But the downside is nobody cares to watch them, because some of those, I don't want to mention names, but are just not good enough to be a candidate. It's wasting people's time watching them. And I believe many young people who especially not like to watch them. So how could we reach out to these young people? Now, in your presentation, you've shown us 3 TV commercials. 2 of them from Trump, isn't it? 2 from Trump. So you were biased. You could get accused of being biased because you only had 1 for Hillary. Well, that's crazy, right? But if it's in Hong Kong and you're doing it in public, then you'll be criticized. And you're not giving any minute, even a second, to those 20 or something candidates, or even more, that could be presidential candidates. And you also mentioned this social media. And we've seen a lot of effort paid by Trump. You presented that he speaks right in Facebook. But he's pretty old, right? And Facebook shouldn't be his tool, but everybody's doing it, right? But now in Hong Kong, we have this question. Who is capable of running Facebook to reach whom? Now, if you are a girl, I don't know whom, but you are not capable of running Facebook. I mean, you could use Facebook, you could use it as an assistant, but you're not talking to the language. You do not know the sentiment of the Facebook, and people didn't really welcome you, okay? But if you're going to go to the TVs, then the young people, I would say the middle-aged people, will not watch them too. So how are we going to tackle this question?
So, a lot of questions. First of which about the debates. Okay, it's controversial in the United States that in order to qualify for one of the debates, and I think the debates have an incredibly important role to play in our election. As you said, we've had 2. We've had 1 vice presidential debate, the 3rd debate will be October 19th. 3 different formats. To qualify, you need to have an average, I believe, of 10% of the votes through public polling. Okay. So it's not inconceivable for a third-party candidate to reach that threshold, but it's up to his or her kind of campaign to get there, right? And Gary Johnson is the closest, but he had a couple of very, very major gaffes. Is anybody familiar with the Gary Johnson gaffes recently? When he was asked to name his most favorites, his most respected foreign leader, he couldn't come up with anybody. And 2 weeks before that, he was asked his position on Aleppo, and he had not even heard of Aleppo. So it's really not the fault of the media or the polls. It's his responsibility, I think, to kind of capture the attention, and you can do that. I will say that in the United States and in other places, that I do think that we can use social media analytics, and I spent a lot of my time outside of Harvard finding ways to leverage these sorts of insights. And I think the future of our industry isn't just asking people what they think through exit polls, through traditional surveys, through focus groups, but also to observe what they're doing. Okay? And there are ways to do that, I think, on Facebook that won't necessarily replace these tools, but help us understand kind of the sentiment through these things. I was very excited and enthusiastic using elements of the social data to predict the Taiwanese election within just a couple of points. And the Iowa caucuses in New Hampshire. So we're still a distance in terms of using this, but there are enough people on enough social networks who choose to share their public views that I think can help inform the way in which we understand public sentiments and public opinion.
That's very good. Now, I would like to open the discussion to the floor. So if you have questions for either speaker, or if you have a point of view you want to put across, please raise your hand.
I have a question for Professor Delavolpe. Hi, I have a question for Professor Delavolpe. So after the first presidential debate, Donald Trump obviously seemed to lose the debate in the perspective of most polls. However, he and of course his right-wing supporters at Breitbart noted that a number of online polls said that Trump won in a landslide or something like that. Similarly, several polls have indicated that despite Clinton having an advantage, she has a lower level of enthusiasm amongst her supporters as compared to Donald Trump. So my question is obviously as an expert in polls is to what extent could online polls, which seem to have a disparity, a little bit of disparity with Christian polling, convey a sense of what you just mentioned as a social media sentiment, maybe online netizens support that is not reflected in traditional polling. And but of course, there are obviously many problems with online polls that you can't solve.
So that's an excellent question, especially to start our conversation. I want to stress that there's a difference between the online polls that the Trump campaign used to publicize the effect of that debate versus online polls that I conduct. Right? So since like 2004, 2005, almost every survey that I've conducted of young people has been conducted online. So technically that's an online survey. Okay? That is a completely different animal than the online polls that we're talking about now and that the Trump campaign publicized. What he publicized was an opt-in online poll. Keyword, opt-in. Essentially, these polls that a lot of media, okay, websites, traditional as well as new media, they will ask, who do you think won the debate? Trump or Clinton? The Drudge Report, a very well-known right-leaning website in the United States, will ask that question. Okay? It's an opt-in poll. It's not at all a representative sample of anyone. You don't need to watch the debate. You can vote 100 times. You can vote 1,000 times. You can create a computer program to vote for you. Okay? That is the online poll that the Trump campaign used to publicize that he won the debate. So those polls, he actually won, right? They're not scientific in any sense of the word. They are, in my view, scientific polls conducted online, and that's worth another conversation about the benefit of those versus traditional telephones versus cell phone, etc. But that's the difference. Opt-in media polls where folks can vote multiple times. There's no screening process versus other ones. So that's the difference. The level of enthusiasm is very, very tricky because there is one outlying, if you look at the summary of public polls in the United States, there's one outlier, the USC Los Angeles Times poll. They have a very, very different methodology. We'll see how accurate it is. And they're weighting the degree to which there's a high level of enthusiasm for a candidate. And when you do that, Trump is overrepresented in that public poll than almost in every other poll. Okay? But what we're finding is, I think it's reasonable to expect that we'll see a lot of young people, as an example, voting on election day, not very enthusiastic about Trump, not very enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton, or even the other candidates. They're less enthusiastic, frankly, about the third-party candidates. They will vote. They may not like it, but they'll vote because it's a civic duty and they think that they need to. And so I think in this particular election, given the lack of trust we see, the level of enthusiasm is important, but not as important a predictor of a vote that it might be in other instances, or perhaps even a primary vote. Thank you. Excellent question.
Hi there.
The young lady would be the next one.
Sure.
No, sorry.
So should I ask one?
Yes, please.
Okay, hi. So it's great to see that some of the examples in which the methodology of your polling has proven to be accurate, but I'd like to ask a question in regards to some of the more, so you could say shocking election results in the past year. Take, for example, the Brexit vote, or the more recently the Colombia's rejection of the referendum on peace. I'd like to ask, in relation to, and it was seen that throughout the time before that election, the polling had consistently said, oh, Britain is going to remain, or the peace deal would be approved by the public. Do you see any factors that you can draw from these two examples where which you could say undermine the accuracy of polling, which can be applied in, say, for example, a US or Hong Kong context?
I'll start. I think there are, for me, the big issue out of Brexit was the opinions of young people who participated versus who didn't participate. We saw low turnout among young folks in Great Britain, and that, I think, was part of the deciding factor. That young people overwhelmingly wanted Great Britain to stay in the European Union, and they didn't vote at the percentage that I think many people predicted. So that's kind of a key indicator. And I just talked to one of my colleagues last night, and we have polled this generation as much as anybody. We think about this. We review polls. I can't tell you 3-4 weeks out whether 50% of 18 to 29-year-olds will turn out, 42%, 46%. I can't tell you. But every single day, dozens of pollsters across America are building models, okay, and just guessing really at what percent. And that's a key indicator. There's so much art to what we do that's actually more important in some cases than the science and figuring out what these election numbers are. So in some respects, all of us are still guessing in terms of what the model is going to be. That's one factor, especially with young people who don't have a track record of clearly identifying what percent of vote we need to assess, give to them in the survey. That's one. The second thing, at least in the United States, is the language. Right? When we look at places like Florida, places like Colorado, two very important swing states, we have a significant part of that electorate are Hispanic or Latino descent, many of which are not assimilated members of their communities. Okay? Those people are not likely to participate in most of the public polls that we read about because they're not large budgets, and most of the interviews are done only in English. So if you're not comfortable speaking in English, you're not part of that. Okay? So therefore, the Democratic vote might be underrepresented. The third aspect, another aspect that I think connects Colombia, Great Britain, and the United States is participating in a poll, I believe, is a political act. And that those folks who are very, very angry, those folks who feel underrepresented, may not be likely to participate in a poll that's non-response bias. And those people are overwhelmingly more likely to support Trump. So I think we've got a couple of different factors here. We've got a couple of factors that may say that the Democrat is underrepresented, it's among young people and Spanish-speaking in the United States. We have another factor of the most angry, the most disconnected, disenchanted folks in society may not be participating through the non-response, more likely to I think, prefer Trump. So those are some of the factors I think that we need to be considerate of. And it's important that the media understand this. It's important that the journalists who cover these issues ask these kinds of questions to help consumers of this think through what polls, what questions they should be asking.
And what polls to report?
I would agree because I believe many of you have many questions or comments. Just on the Brexit, I have a number of colleagues in the World Organization sort of doing the post-mortem analysis of what went wrong. And there are a number of so-called hypotheses which is still to be tested. But the differential kind of turnout in the real election itself, or the referendum itself, that was, of course, a very important factor. There's a model developed by one of my international colleagues to say that when we have referendum polling, pre-referendum polling, then probably the status quo of yes or no, depending on the situation, will persist if there's a so-called hybrid. But this time, she did it wrong. But then she modified the model to say that, well, perhaps we overlooked one thing. The older people in Britain actually wanted to get away from the UK, from the Union, because it was the status quo in their generation. So again, the theory goes on and on. I think it requires a lot of academic analysis and postmodern analysis too. But I do like to bring out this very important issue, which I sort of touched on. It's really the interaction between the polls and the real voters in the final day or the final hours, which sometimes carry some weight. We have been analyzing or postulating that it's this bandwagon effect, underdog effect, that if you think you're supporting, the candidate you support or the premises you support is a sure win, then you probably won't bother to vote. But then you finally find that you lost it, because everybody like you think the same way. So this interactive process really requires a more analysis.
All right, the young lady there, and then the man in the green shirt. And then over here.
Thank you very much for the very fascinating presentations. One of the things that struck me, and I think you just mentioned this, is what is who's communicating these outcomes or these predictions to the young people? Do they realize how significant, a power they now wield in world politics? Because, I've seen this in Hong Kong with my own students. They, and with Brexit we saw, they lament, if only they knew. If someone had told them in a manner that they would understand, then they would know what they need to do. So I'm very curious. You mentioned earlier, John, that you're even engaging with the politicians' campaigns to tell them this is what you need to do. Who's speaking to the young people?
That's a great question. And yeah, you'll have more young people vote in this election under 30 than people over the age of 65. Right? Which is where so many traditional resources. So yeah, that's a tough question. That's part of our job, which is to communicate to other universities. We have a consortium. At Harvard, we have a national consortium of a couple of dozen other universities where we help train folks to register, to mobilize folks. There are a lot of, I think, a rise in charitable foundation work over the last decade in terms of mobilizing young voters. It's still difficult, right? It's still challenging to talk to the very traditional people who run these campaigns to let them know of the impact that this vote has. Very, very difficult. And you can see that not for young people, Barack Obama would have won, not for young people, Bernie Sanders. So I don't know why it's been so difficult, but I think we still need to kind of continue to empower young people. So many of them are going to stay home and choose to disenfranchise themselves when really they've got more of an impact as a generation than any generation in the history of America. More people are of the millennial generation than any generation ever. About 25% of our citizenry in a third of the world fits with the demographic report between 1980 and 2000, if they choose to use this influence in ballot box.
Case in Hong Kong? Young people participation?
I think last 2 weeks, I went to education university, and your presentation also heard our professionals of how it's presented. And there was this study, actually 2 panelists did a study on so-called data mining the social networks. And they don't have conclusive evidence yet, but it seems that especially on this very special issue or phenomenon, FE2, why did it became so successful? And there was this study which tagged on the figures on the content of this Facebook release, how frequency you use this Facebook, what content were there, and how many hits and likes were there. And those statistics seems to be quite useful. It sort of explains his success, but not the other candidates' failure or success. But seems that this is the so-called new media emerging, and we require a lot of study on the new media itself. And even for Trump and Hillary, you've quoted a lot of Facebook material. But the question is, who is going to post what? And for the recipients to read all these, are they reading the millennials? And when they read them, was there positive or negative feedback? So I guess this will be a lesson for always.
Then the man in the green shirt.
Thank you for your presentation. Actually, I have a question for you. The Bible which is not the new of criticism. Firstly, regarding of the sampling size, I guess Dr. Zhong would be confident with the size, but are you comfortable with the fact that for a very long time during the campaign, that's the only poll number that the public can actually talk about? And are you comfortable with the frequency, the high frequency of the poll, that which interacts with the talking of the public and is coupling with all these factors? If you can go back in time, what would you like to change? What would you like to improve the poll? Maybe internet resource. And we'd like to comment that what in the engineering part of the strategic voting that could be changed that would benefit either to the campaigner voters or even the pollers. Maybe the body of the strategic voters can be better defined. Will that be better for the engineering? Can you comment on that as well? And the last question is for both of the panelists. I remember you mentioned that the young generation, the Facebook generation, is very hard to reach, even for resourceful politicians. So how do you reach them?
Quick answers. I'm not so happy with the growing cooperation that we've done because we did not have the resources to do it much bigger. But this is actually media versus media question in Hong Kong. If the media is not going to pay for the operation, who's going to pay for it? Now we pay for some of the resources, but we just do it much bigger. We have the capacity to do it at least twice as big as what we have been seeing, at least at the early part of it. The latter part of it, especially the last week of it, I think that's almost as much as we could do. 500 sample, 600 per day in the last time. So I think this has to do with resources, but whether the polls are good enough or accurate enough, or whether it's useful enough, I think the most important part is to really read deeper into the methodology and all those sampling errors, all those little nitty-gritties, which I expect the professional journalists understand and thereby relay all this information to the public. Now, on your last question on how we could have helped the campaigners better, I would have to say that we are not bothered by the campaigners. They're politically neutral. What we have helped them, and actually everyone this year, is that we open the data set to everybody who's interested in running good analysis, and that's it.
So, very quick, because I know we're short on time. In terms of how to reach young people, I think that whoever you are, Donald Trump, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton, in our country or others, is that they have dozens, hundreds, thousands, of millions of people who care about their positions, who care about the country, who are choosing to express themselves on social media. Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, a dozen other places as well. And I think it's incumbent upon those elected officials, those public servants, to identify those people, ask them, empower them with information, not negative information, but positive information, and ask them to become advocates kind of on their behalf. That's what Barack Obama did. He didn't vote, he didn't choose to use young people as just one constituency like anybody else. He said, in order for us essentially to be successful, you need to be part of this effort. He convinced your parents to vote for me. Okay? So that's really, I think, kind of what folks need to do. Trump can do it just as easily as Clinton can do it. They are there, they're raising their hands, and they want to be kind of connected with, whether it's online or offline. That's the key. Identify the influencers, empower them, and be part of that campaign, and start with that way, because that'll help spread the message for you.
I'm going to give the next question to the gentleman on the right, but I want to ask, how many of you would like to ask questions? One, two, and the second, the third, and
hello. First, I thank you for all the open data. I definitely disagree with one of the points you made. Just your discussion things about we let the polling to decide, for example, who to go to television stations. If you're using your poll data, you find out that actually one of the guys is lowest in the polling, and using that kind of filtering, you'll be out. In fact, one of the reasons why we have the large population television, I think polling is good in the sense that getting more information about people, but I think it's sometimes not very good to filter out people for the and we will have more people to listen to. I wonder about the polling part. I don't know, is there any open data in the American, which is something which interests me? Because I think that this one, the guy, the next cycle, when we have, I hope that voters still continue to open the data, and we know how to deal with it. Because I thought just in Hong Kong we open the data, but the supporting infrastructure, unless no resources, supporting resources is not there, and therefore it's very good to use it. But I don't know about the experience of the US. And finally, also one point about the review is that I understand that there's some, you asked about the political incorrectness. May I correct you something about, there's two kinds of political incorrectness. One is about the language part. The other part is the idea part. That Ms. Yao is maybe the language not very right, but he pointed out a very important problem we have. And therefore I think what Donald Trump is different is that he's politically incorrect in terms of the idea part of the language.
do you know what? You're absolutely right. Yes. She told it like it is. I mean, you cannot quibble with that. Basically, there's a real lack of answer. And this is something we all understand. But over to you, John.
I think the key part is, in the United States, there's a terrific organization called PolitiFact. And in every major newspaper now actually tracks how truthful each of the statements are during the debates. Okay? And I think it's a good point to separate the use of language versus the veracity or the truth of those statements. And I don't remember their number off the top of my head, but it's not unusual in a given week, for more than half of the politically incorrect statements offered by Donald Trump is example to be false. Okay, just to be false. There are not more immigrants creating crime in America than citizens. It's just not true. And there are lots of other examples. So I think that's a very, very good point to separate that. The other thing is most all of our polling data now is available. There's two major websites that publish a lot of it, the links, you can go into it and do your own analysis. That's how I get a lot of my data, especially with the youth vote. 538 in the upshot are two significant sites. Real Clear Politics also is a good site too. So most everything publicly available.
One.
for the wonderful lecture. And I have a question particularly for Professor Mo. Donald Trump repeatedly claimed that the news media are very unfair and biased toward him. That's because funding for these agencies such as CNN, as the Clinton News Network, and the Foley New York Times. Do you think these media really are not very neutral and really have a preference for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump? And if they do, how much will this so-called media bias impact the poll results, even the election outcome? Thank you.
Thank you. So this is my personal. So again, one of the things that's worth noting is that a overwhelming majority of American voters do not trust the media. Okay. Among young people, 9%, I believe it was 9% of folks in my last survey, 9%, less than 1 in 10 trust the media to do the right thing all or most of the time. So regardless of what I believe, okay, the overwhelming majority of American citizens believe there is media bias. Okay? If you conducted a survey of journalists, of the folks who do the reporting, a majority of those folks' opinions will be progressive or liberal, kind of lining up with a Democrat. That's just kind of who chooses to enter that field. Having said that, I personally don't believe that a lot of the major news sources that you talked about have a particular bias. I know, and I don't think they're necessarily kind of affecting that campaign. It's a very useful narrative, right, for a losing campaign, a campaign who's challenged, okay, to use to pick a fight, because they know that an overwhelming majority of their support agrees with them, right? You know, it was only the first couple of minutes of the debate that I watched here this morning where Donald Trump said it's 1 against 3. You know, it's just not me 1 against 1, it's me against Hillary, but also Martha Raddatz from ABC and Anderson Cooper for CNN. So it's a very helpful political tactic. I think it's probably overstated the sense of media bias in the U.S.
And then you will have the last question. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a journalism student in HKU, and I'm here to have a quick question for Dr. Chong. As just now you presented the exit polls and the roles that the polls has played in the electoral election, which held just 2 months ago. So I was wondering, because the polling, so it provides a prevalent and general picture to the public and the voters for the election, which indicate the potential direction of the election, or to create a general knowledge for the voters who's going to vote. But the voters and the citizens, so I have a question, is that do they actually obtain or possess enough political insight or enough political knowledge to properly process or analyze the exit polls result, and thus to use it as a tool to help them make a better decision in terms of the independence and soundness of their voting decision? Or that could be a risk, a potential risk that it could actually turn into integrating the underlying principle of a democratic election, because the original notion of a democratic election should be represent the pure public onion without any indicators. So, and the second question is, I would like to ask you to briefly comment on the role of Walk Solar, the roles of that play in the electoral election which held 2 months ago in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Right, again, quick one. I'm glad to have the question from a journalist student. We running posters, running polling, and also I believe the journalist profession around the world actually fight for the freedom of information. The information itself might not be understood by the general public. But what else could we do? Of course, if we forbid them, okay, then nobody gets the information. But whether you're going to forbid it or not, there are some privileged people, rich people, who would get hold of some data. Even if it's not in the public, they could conduct their polls. Are we looking for this scenario? If we like that, a elite society or a closed society, then maybe we would go for no poll or banning polls. But then I think we in Hong Kong have been so used to freedom of everything that we should protect the freedom of information. Now, of course, journalists, professional journalists, should spend more effort to understand all the nitty-gritties, correctness or incorrectness of using polls, and then educate yourself and then educate the public. Now, I think we see ourselves, or I myself see myself, taking the role of providing scientific, credible information, and that would be almost the end of it. I love to do more than educate everybody, but it's really difficult. So that's a short answer. The long answer that I teach a course, and I spend a lesson in that course to talk about freedom of publication of polls. And I have a whole lot of literature and rationale for and against it. But if we prefer to see responsible citizens and a free society, then let them digest the information freely and make their own decision. Stupid debate, right? Okay. And for the election engineering, Thunderbolt or Thunder Beta or something like that, I know too little about it. My answer is very simple. I'm not part of it at all. But I appreciate their work, and I actually appreciate everybody's work who dare to use open data and who dare to say we are going to campaign with open data and open strategy. We are providing open data to everybody. And I believe, well, that's my hunch, I don't have evidence, other than the so-called programmers who have been looking very closely at the data on a day-to-day basis, I'm quite sure that other people using the data as well, because it's so open, we cannot count it and don't bother. But even if we don't open the data, there will be some people, privileged people, who have these information and they do their own election engineering, sort of Thunderbolt in silence. But this time we have a Thunderbolt in the open, although it is not thunder at all, but it's not much noise. But I think we're talking about fairness notices.
Level playing.
Yes, exactly.
For the presentation, firstly, I have a question for Dr. Zhou. How to address the issue of underrepresentation of young people in the traditional telephone posts. Well, I know that, to my knowledge, your results of your women posts have made many campaign managers feel very stressful 2 months ago. So the accuracy of your own post was very important. Was just very important. So how do you? So if you were given more resources, what would you do to make your post more representative, more duly representative of the people? And I have another question for Professor Volker. Just now, Professor Chin had mentioned that you were talking about three types of polls. One is academic poll and campaign poll. Would you elaborate more on that?
Okay, the question for me, advice for young people, I'll just give them two pieces of advice. Number one, study more about social surveys and read more about these technicalities about the polls, especially if you're going to use it, then understand them first. If you don't have the resources, then go to the open data and you should have it. The second advice is more important, I think, is more of a conceptual or theoretical advice. I've told you that all these polls, no matter how accurate they are, would be part of the interactive process. It's an interaction between the polls and the electorate and also the candidates. So if you are the candidates, or perhaps you're the supporter of the candidates, don't take polls as deterministic, as completely deterministic of what will happen. Because what is different from what ought to be. So when you know the picture of this second or this moment, the future tomorrow could be very different. Because after understanding all these, understanding yourself, understanding what people think, you could carve your own way. So don't take it as completely deterministic, because this is not what science is meant for. Predictions are meant to be wrong. If all predictions are 100% correct, there's not much point for science. And polling is as much as a science as an art.
Thank you. So very briefly, I'll touch upon the main differences between a campaign poll, which is what I engaged in the first part of my career, and an academic poll. Right? And it's really about the objective. Right? The objective of the campaign poll is to persuade voters to choose one campaign or another campaign. It's to identify the topics, the issues, the messages within a 30-second commercial or just a couple minutes of debate most likely to persuade or to move people. That's the point of that effort. And to identify which people are most likely to change their opinion and persuaded, and then you can use it to buy TV commercials and mail and other things. Right? The objective of academic polling is to provide some insight in terms of why people vote versus not vote. They're kind of the ideology, how it might change over time. Elements that a traditional campaign don't necessarily have a perspective on or the resources to measure. So I think one is about how to affect a particular election, who the 10 to 15, 20% of undecideds are, what information you need to provide to them to make them choose one candidate over another. As compared to academic, we have a longer point of view. We're interested to understand not just who votes, but why, and what the messages might be for greater levels of participation. So there's certainly some elements of the campaign poll that use an academic poll to make them relevant to the campaign and the media, so hopefully they can learn from that and incorporate some of those insights about the American dream, about confidence in the systems that can help inform the campaign. It's kind of, I try to use a blend. That's an excellent question, and thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending today. We've enjoyed it. Just one minor correction when you write up your papers. John's name is Professor Della Volpe, not Professor Volpe. He is Irish Italian American. That's why you should address him as Professor Della Volpe. That's all. Thank you very much.